Yeah, welcome to our June technical meeting. We are recording the meeting and we'll make it available later for anybody who wants to watch it again or who is not able to attend. Are you guys able to see my screen, my blue? I guess it's changing from blue to our agenda now.
Looks good.
Yep.
I can see it.
Sounds good. So as usual, I just put the agenda on the screen, just talk about a couple of things. And then our main topic today is we're going to talk about Ashrae. Wanted to talk about some strategies and think about whether we're, if there are some situations where we might be overventilating homes. But before we get into that, let's just go through our training opportunities and any new business. The training opportunities I have listed are that the first one is next Tuesday on June 7th. We are going to hold our annual Audit Setup Fuel Library meeting at the training center. And I'll also be broadcasting that via Google. For those of you who do not know what that is, all it is that we, for the last few years, we've been holding a meeting every year in June where basically I need one person from each agency to attend. That person should basically be the lead auditor or the person who knows about setting up the audit and setting up, some of the setup library stuff, or the person that should know that. It's okay if you don't know that. But anyway, I'll be expecting at least one person from each agency to join us. If you have more than one person that you would like to join, you are welcome. More than one person is welcome from each agency if you want to come and learn and understand that. But basically, we take just a couple of hours each year and make sure that each agency has created a new setup library for the coming year. So we'll be creating a new setup library that will go into effect on July 1. We'll make sure that you have all your new fuel costs in that library, and we'll take some time to talk about, all of the other settings, make sure everything's set up right so we can start the new program year off right. So again, that's next Tuesday morning. I think it's at 8 o'clock. I will send out an email to the coordinators after this meeting and ask the coordinators to let me know who will be attending that meeting. And I will send that group of people a link to the meeting. You're welcome to join the meeting just online, or you can come up to the IWTC and join me in person if you would like, whatever is most convenient for you. Any questions about that one? All right. The second training opportunity there is that we're holding a Energy Audit 101 class in a couple weeks up at the IWTC. The registration for that is closed. So if you're planning on attending, you should have received an email from me. And for those who are attending, I put information in that email about your prerequisites. And I think what I wrote on the screen is incorrect. I think I gave you till June 9th or something. Check that email, but basically you have until the deadline in that email to send me your prerequisite energy audit. If you're going to attend that class, you must complete one energy audit before you come to the class. And you need to send me a copy of it. So if you have any questions or concerns about that or need any help with that, this week would be a really good time to reach out to me and I can help you with it. Anybody have any questions on that? All right. Under new business, just had a couple of things. The first one is that we did what you all love. We created a new form. So just an FYI, if you're going to do a peer exchange, we've created a form that will help you kind of with the planning of that peer exchange, make sure that it's effective, that the agency you're going to go visit knows that you're coming and that they have a plan for you and everything. So if you're going to do a peer exchange, just reach out to us at the state and we'll send you a copy of that form as you prepare for your peer exchange. And we just, once again, always encourage you guys to utilize peer exchange as a learning tool. If you need to freshen up your skills, or if you need to learn something, one of the ways you can do that is to go visit another agency and spend a little time learning how they do it. So anyway, the second item there is that basically, due to some of the supply chain issues going on right now, we're going to allow for a temporary adjustment to the HVAC repair versus replacement guidance that we have in the guidelines. So right now in the guidelines, there's basically some thresholds that if you're looking at repairing some HVAC equipment, once you cross those thresholds, which is, I think it's like $300 to $500 depending on the situation. Basically, if the repair is going to cost more than that, we typically recommend that you replace the equipment. But due to some supply chain issues, you may find some situations where it would be better or might be better to just repair the equipment. If you can't get new equipment for a while, but you're able to get the appropriate parts, we're offering flexibility with that, basically. So if you get into any situation where it seems like the repairs are getting really expensive, I recommend that you send us a case-by-case request, and we can get involved and give you some written approval for whatever's going to be best there. Any questions on that?
I just want to add, Turner, getting equipment is extremely difficult. I couldn't even get 2 coils from a supplier I've been working with for over 20 years. So bear that in mind. They are giving priority to volume purchasers, so customers who spend a lot of money on a regular basis with them. It's just like everything else, concrete, lumber, whatever. So use your bulk buying abilities to help enable your agencies to get equipment that you need. But yeah, stuff is really hard to get, and there's severe shortages on HVAC equipment, coils, furnaces, condensers, you name it. So keep that in mind, please.
Thanks, Wade. Anything else, for any other questions on that? All right. The next item.
I got a memo later today formally waiving that provision in the guidelines.
Oh, thanks, Brad. The next item I had listed there was just, it says WAP Memo 74A, and the weatherization program at the federal level, they sent out Memo 74 a little while ago that basically said that the new NEAT audit was going to be available online sometime this year. Well, they sent out WAP Memo 74A a week or so ago that basically said it's not going to be available. So we had given DOE some specific plans that we were going to follow so that we could implement the new online audit within 90 days of when it came out. But basically, for right now, we don't know when it's going to be out. That we haven't received any other guidance other than DOE said it's not going to be ready in time. So FYI. And then the last item I had here was just program award nominations, and I didn't take the time. Brad, where are we at with that? Are the nominations still open?
Yeah, they're still open, and quite frankly, I haven't looked at them because of my hospital stays and now trying to get caught up, and I'm currently working on trying to get some money contracted. So those things obviously take priority. I'll probably look at them middle of the month. I'll send out an email letting you know I'm closing stuff, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. So if you've got any nominations, it sounds like you still have a little bit of time to get them in, but they will be closing sometime soon. So that's all the new business I had. Does anybody have anything else that would be good for this group, or any questions about anything before we jump into the main topic for today? All right. Well, let's jump into Ashrae. So I feel like I talk about Ashrae a lot, but looking down the list of attendees, I noticed there's a handful of new people in the program that may not have heard much about Ashrae. And so for those of you who have heard me talk about Ashrae a lot, bear with me a little bit. I just want to talk about some of the basics first for some of the newer people in the program. And for those new people in the program, if you're not understanding this, please speak up. Or, if you really feel like it's just way over your head, reach out to me, and, we can, depending on the need, we can provide some more basic training on this kind of stuff. But anyway, I'm going to take a few minutes to go over the basics, and then we're going to kind of dive deep into a couple of aspects of Ashrae today. So basic stuff. First off, Ashrae is an air quality standard that we are required to adhere to. Ashrae is actually the name of a committee that came up with these standards, and it's the air conditioning. Oh, I can't ever remember what they are. The American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. So a bunch of professionals in the HVAC and refrigeration industry had to establish some standards. And we apply just one of those standards to our weatherization, and that's number 62.2. And all that is it's the minimum requirements of mechanical and natural ventilation systems to provide acceptable indoor air quality in residential buildings. So it's just an indoor air quality standard. I think we misuse the name Ashrae a lot in our program, and that's okay, but because we often just refer to it as Ashrae, but it's actually a very specific standard that Ashrae group has set up, which is 62.2. But that's what we're talking about when we say Ashrae in our weatherization program. Now, why do we use Ashrae? Well, DOE was looking for a air quality standard, and they selected the Ashrae 62.2 to be applied to every home. So here's a couple of just kind of foundational requirements from DOE as far as Ashrae goes. So first and foremost, every house we weatherize must meet the Ashrae standard when we're done. So we have to make sure that each home has adequate ventilation when we're done, so that we don't make anybody sick or kill them. So every home must meet Ashrae. And then within that, DOE has required that we estimate Ashrae. So that means auditors are required to estimate what the home might need in order to meet Ashrae when it's done being weatherized. So that's why our calculator has an estimate side and has a final calculation side. And that's the next one. So we are required to actually calculate Ashrae post-weatherization after we're all done. And that includes us measuring any fans that we installed as part of the weatherization process. Basically, our Ashrae calculation, or our post-weatherization Ashrae calculation, it is going to include the actual measured flow of all of the fans that we installed as part of our Ashrae strategy. So those are just the general rules, and that's kind of why the program looks the way it looks. We do an estimate, and then we do a final calculation, and all of this is required because DOE has said this is the air quality standard that we will adhere to. Now, within Ashrae, there's really three parts to the calculation. And those three parts add up to the total amount of building ventilation that is going to be required. So part number one, we have just what our whole building ventilation need is. And that's based on the number of people that are going to be in the house and the size of the house or the volume of the house. So when we're calculating our whole building ventilation, we put in the number of people. We also put in the number of bedrooms. And we put in the finished square footage, and that is how the ASHRAE standard kind of extrapolates the volume of the building and how much air is needed for that many people in that size of a building. So part one, whole building ventilation. Part two is that, some buildings are leakier than others. And so some of them are in windier places than others. Some of them are taller than others. So each building has a certain amount of natural infiltration. And when you're calculating it, you actually get a credit for that. So basically you figure out what your whole building ventilation needs are. Let's say that we had a building that needed 100 CFM of ventilation. Well, when you calculate you figure out what your natural infiltration credit is, let's say that you get a credit of 30 CFM. So what that means is that you would subtract 30 from your 100 CFM of whole building ventilation. And so putting step 1 and 2 together, you would only need 70 CFM of whole building ventilation after you take that infiltration away. And then the third part is the local exhaust deficit. Now, if you're building a new building, this one really doesn't apply, and I'll show you why in a minute. But since we're working on existing buildings, then we're actually responsible to figure out if there is a local exhaust deficit. And whenever there is a deficit, we actually increase the amount of ventilation needed, or we add that back to it. And I got a couple of slides, and we'll talk a little bit more about why we do that. But you add those three parts together, and that will tell you how much whole building ventilation you need. So on the screen right now, I have an image, and I apologize, you may not be able to read all the numbers on there, but you don't need to. It's not important for what we're going to talk about on this slide. But I just want to show you that this has those three parts to it. So part one, when you're estimating or calculating, you're going to put in all the information under step 1 for your whole building ventilation. Step 2 is where you put in the dwelling height and what your pre-blower door number is. And you also select your nearest weather station, because all those are factors on how much natural infiltration you might get on the home. And then when you're estimating it, you put in your estimated reduction. So if we think we're going to get a 30% reduction, you put that in there. And based on all of that, it'll calculate what your natural infiltration credit is. And then step 3 is that local exhaust deficit. So we put in information about our local exhaust fans, and the calculator will figure out if we have a deficit or not, and it will help us add that to our whole building ventilation strategy. And the one thing I wanted to point out here right now is just that on the new calculator, all of the stuff in purple it pertains to that whole building ventilation or strategy, or how much ventilation is required. So, and we'll show you a couple of scenarios and actually run some calculations here in a few minutes. So, any questions though, just in general about these 3 steps? And then we're going to take a deep dive on step number 3 is the goal here today. All right, so let me ask you this question. What is the difference between the local exhaust fans and our whole building fans, or our whole building ventilation? Anybody give me an answer on that? What's the difference between local exhaust and whole building ventilation? If I walk into a bathroom and you guys have installed a ASHRAE fan in the bathroom, then what's the difference? Is that a local exhaust fan, or is there a whole building ventilation?
That one should be a whole building ventilation.
Okay. Zach says it's whole building ventilation. Anybody else? So if you guys have installed a fan, somebody on the chat said local, and it's both. What I want to point out here is that they are two completely separate things, and we use a lot of the times we will use one fan for both of them. If you install an Ashrae fan in a bathroom, it meets the requirements of the local exhaust aspects of the Ashrae standard, and you also put it in there to meet the whole building ventilation. But I've been noticing a lot of confusion about this, and so I want to talk about it some more, and I want to show you some scenarios and hopefully help clear this up. And the confusion might be just the teacher. Like as I've tried to think about a better way to teach this to you guys, I feel like I'm coming up short. So if this has really clicked for anybody and you guys have some good analogies or anything, please speak up as we're talking about this today. Because I don't have any great new ways to explain it. But this is how I've explained it in the past. This is a slide some of you may have seen in trainings past. And basically the way that I learned it, the way that I was able to wrap my head around it was this, that if you're building a brand new home and the building department requires you to meet ASHRAE 62.2, then they would expect you to put local exhaust fans in all of your kitchens and bathrooms. Why do we want to have local exhaust fans in our kitchens and bathrooms? What's the purpose of local exhaust fans, or local ventilation is what they've got in the table here?
Moisture and smells.
Yeah. The smells, like, I think we dismiss that a little bit. It's kind of funny when you look back at the history of ASHRAE. One of the first recorded instances of a indoor air quality standard actually came from a Department of Education, where they had a rule that if there were so many students in a room, the teachers had to open the windows because the kids were only bathing, on Saturday night before they went to church, and then they just start to smell throughout the week. But really, when it comes to the ASHRAE standard, our primary concern is actually the bulk moisture. So the rooms in a home that are going to have the greatest amount of bulk moisture, which is like we're doing something in that room to cause a lot of steam, and we need to move that steam out of the house before it gets absorbed into the building. It's going to be a kitchen and a bathroom. And so within the ASHRAE standard, they actually require that you have local exhaust fans in kitchens and bathrooms, and the whole point is for them to move that bulk moisture out as quickly as possible. And the ASHRAE standard requires that in a kitchen that you have a fan that moves 100 CFM of air, and that is the vented range hood. So that fan needs to be the fan directly above your range, because that's the appliance that is boiling water and making the bulk moisture. So 100 CFM in a kitchen, and then in a bathroom, it's 50 CFM, and our bulk moisture in a bathroom is going to be coming from a shower or a bathtub. So if I was building a brand new home today, and I took my plans to the building department, and I use this example because this is exactly what my building department did to me 5 years ago. When I turned my plans in, they said, how are you going to meet the ASHRAE standard? And I said, well, I'll have fans in my kitchen that moves 100 CFM of air, and I'll have a fan in each bathroom that moves at least 50 CFM of air. And they said, okay, that will cover your local exhaust. That's it. That'll cover your local exhaust. But then they said, what about your whole building ventilation? And that is completely separate. In addition to moving bulk moisture, they also want to know, what am I going to do to provide ventilation to the entire building to make sure that I have good indoor air quality? And this is, this table here is just a table showing, based on the number of bedrooms and the number of square footage of finished space, they just have a number of ventilation that is required. So I told my city, yeah, I'll have a fan in every one of these rooms. And so for my house, let's say I built a house with 2,000 square foot of finished space, and I have 4 bedrooms. So I would be required to have 98 CFM of continuous ventilation as well. And so I told them that what I would do is I would make sure that one of my bathroom fans, which would serve as a local exhaust fan, that it would also have the capability to ventilate at least 90 CFM continuously. And that would meet the requirement of the whole building ventilation. So I was using one fan to meet both of these requirements, which is what we do every day in weatherization. But it's important for everybody to understand that they are 2 separate requirements, and we need to make sure that we're meeting both of them. So that's new construction. And when it comes to weatherization, we're not building new homes, right? So how often do you guys go into a kitchen in a home that you're working on and find that the fan in the above the range is moving 100 CFM or more out of the house? Does that happen in every home that you go into? I'd say it's happening in, 1 out of 5, maybe 2 out of 5, but not in every home, right? So when the Department of Energy started looking at the ASHRAE standard to apply it to our program, they had to overcome that issue. They basically said, well, we can't provide 100 CFM of air in every kitchen, 100 CFM of local exhaust in every kitchen and 50 CFM in every bathroom, because a lot of the homes we work on don't have fans in them, or the fans don't move that much air, and we can't always add a new fan. But we would like to use the ASHRAE standard. So they took that to the ASHRAE committee, and the committee looked at it and they said, well, we could have you just add, if you don't have enough local exhaust, we could have you increase the amount of whole building ventilation to make up for it. So here's a little scenario here. Let's say we have a home where we're required 100 CFM of air in the kitchen, but let's say that the kitchen fan only moves 65 CFM of air. So that means we have a deficit of 35. We need 100, we only have 65, so that leaves a remainder or a deficit of 35. So what the ASHRAE committee said is, if you'll just take the deficit, and now if we don't need to add the whole 35 to our whole building ventilation, but they said if you'll add 25% of that to your whole building ventilation, then that way that should be good enough. That should make up for this deficit, because the reason for the local exhaust fans is to move that bulk moisture. Now, if we turned our whole building ventilation fan up by the total of the deficit, then that would probably be overkill, because these fans are on all the time. We don't need to leave the bathroom fan or the kitchen fan on all the time. They are demand controlled or on demand fans for a reason. The human element turns the fan on when the room gets steamy, right? So, and then they turn it off when it's been ventilated. So basically, the ASHRAE committee said, if you'll just turn up this ventilation by 25% of whatever your deficit is, then you can use our standard and apply it, and that will overcome any shortcomings you have in your local exhaust. So in this example, if we had a deficit of 35, 25% of 35 is like 8 point something. So basically 9. So they would say if you would just turn up your fan, if you needed 98 CFM and you just turn it up by 9 more, so we'd go 107. So if we just made sure we had 107 CFM of continuous whole building ventilation, then that would make up for our deficit. But so in existing construction, we're going to look at our local exhaust. We're going to figure out if there is a deficit. And if there is, we're going to add 25% of that to our whole building ventilation to make up for the deficit. And that's how we meet ASHRAE. Questions on that? All right. So with that in mind, let's look at the calculator and let's do an example. Gosh, my mouse keeps scrolling backward for some reason today. So I've got a scenario on the screen. So if we had a single family dwelling in Cedar City with 1,723 square feet of finished space, 4 bedrooms, 2 occupants. We have a dwelling height of 9 feet and a pre-blower door number of this. And then I have some information about my local exhaust fans. So it says in the kitchen, I have a fan that's moving 32 CFM of air and there is no window. What does the window have to do with anything? Can somebody tell me what the window has to do with ASHRAE?
It gives you credit if you have a window in a kitchen or a bathroom.
Why? You are correct, Shad. Why do we get a credit for that?
Because you can open the window to ventilate that area, I guess.
Yeah. So if you don't have an operable window, say it's a fixed window, does that count?
No.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I like to imagine that conversation happening between DOE and the ASHRAE committee. Who knows what they actually really said, but in my mind, somebody said, well, what about the windows? Like if we can open the windows, that's ventilation, isn't it? And the ASHRAE committee said, you know what, well, if you have an operable window, we'll give you 20 CFM credit. So if you have 1 or more operable windows in a kitchen, then you get a total of 20 CFM. You don't get any more if you have multiple windows. But the window must be operable. So in my scenario here, I've just listed no window or with window, but please do not mistake that window must be operable. If you get into a house and it's just a fixed pane of glass, that does not count as an operable window, and you can't use that as a credit.
So a question on that.
Yeah.
If you have in a kitchen and you have a sliding glass door, does that count as your window?
That's a great question. I would say no. In general, the window is typically like, and we don't really get into screens or anything like that, but the whole purpose of a window is to open up for ventilation. The sliding glass door's purpose is to get in and out of the house. So based on the way that they've written the standard, it doesn't allow for doors or anything. I think, somebody could definitely open the sliding door and use their screen, but when we're applying the ASHRAE standard, we should not be doing that.
All right, sounds good.
Any other questions on that? Thanks for that one, Zach. That's one I'm sure many of us have run into. Okay, so we got a kitchen with a fan that works and no window, a bath that's moving 15 CFM with a fan, sorry, with a window. And we have bath number 2 with no fan and no window. So let's just put that into our new Ashrae calculator. Now, hopefully, you guys have seen, oops, let me see if I can get my other screen. Which one do I want? That one? No. Yes. No. I think that one. If you haven't seen it, we have not published this on our resources page yet. I was waiting for some feedback. I actually have not received, I've received a couple of phone calls and emails, but that's about it. And really no major concerns or issues. So I think in the coming weeks, we will be publishing this on our, we'll be replacing our old Ashrae calculator with this new one. So I guess if you have any major concerns about it, you might have a week or so to give me some feedback. Otherwise, we're going to swap them out on our resources page. If you don't know how to get this, I will, with today's meeting, I will send out a link to it. I've sent that out in the past, but I'll send it out again today because I know there's a few new people on here. But you can use that link until it's on our resources page. But this is what the new calculator looks like. And I only have half of it on the screen. I'm going to scroll a little bit here. So on the left-hand side is the estimate. On the right-hand side is where you do your final calculation. In fact, let me zoom out. So this is what the new calculator looks like. I'm going to zoom in just on the estimate side of things. But basically, the final calculation looks similar to the estimate. But I just want to focus on the estimate side of things today. And a lot of what we talk about will apply to the final as well. So let's put this scenario in. So scenario 1, first step is our whole building ventilation. Now there is, this new field was added to this calculator and it was to help differentiate. If you guys get into any homes that are attached units, if it's a duplex, a 3-plex, or a 4-plex, you can't use our calculator. You have to use the red calculator. We have not set our calculator up to do anything but single family. So be aware of that. If you, on this calculator, if you select this other one, it just tells you you can't use this calculator, just to kind of remind you. But in this case, we have single family. We had 4 bedrooms, 2 occupants, and our finished square footage is 1723. And so that gives us our estimated whole building ventilation. It's saying based on that many people and that size of a home, we're going to need 89 CFM of continuous whole building ventilation. Now we go to our infiltration credit to figure out if we can lower that number a little bit. And so to do that, we want to know our nearest weather station. And this is in Cedar City. So there's a weather station in Cedar City. So we'll select that. We want to know our dwelling height. And if you ever forget, there's a little note, but this is the vertical distance between the lowest and highest above grade points. So you have to think about where's the lowest above grade point. If they have like a garage under or something, then it's probably going to be the garage floor. You know, if it's a half basement, or you know, a half walkout or half light basement or daylight basement, it's going to be wherever the dirt is, you know, at that lowest point, and then the highest point. So on this case, our house is looks like it's probably just a standard height house, 9 feet. Our blower door 2216, and then calculator just defaults to 30% reduction. But if you get into a situation where you feel like you're going to knock it out of the park, you can change that. You know, if you think you're going to get a 50% reduction, change that so that you can estimate what you think is going to happen. If you're scratching your head on your air sealing strategy and you feel like there is no way you're going to get 30%, make an adjustment so that you can plan accordingly, because the whole purpose of this estimate is to make a plan for when you're weatherizing this house, how you're going to ventilate it when you're done. Anyway, so the infiltration credit. So this is coming up and it's saying we have an estimated infiltration credit of 50. And it comes up as a negative number so that you can add them together. But basically, it's right now we have our whole building ventilation at 89, and we have a credit of 50. So that really, we would be subtracting 50 from 89. And so far we need, what is that? Oh gosh, 49, 39. I can't do math today. I think that's 49. So that's how much ventilation we would now need. But we're not done yet. The last thing we need to do is we need to put in information about our local exhaust fans. And we're doing that to see if we have a deficit. And if we do, we're going to add that to the amount of whole building ventilation that we need. So on the old calculator and the new calculator, you can select the number of bathrooms. It looks like we have 2 bathrooms in this situation and 1 kitchen. And then this column right here is a new column. We were missing a piece of information on our old calculator, and that was just to be able to record what was going on in the house before weatherization. So these numbers right here represent our pre-weatherization numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in. We have a fan in the kitchen that's moving 32 CFM of air, a fan in the bathroom that's moving 15, and then a fan in bath 2 that, well, we don't have one there, so I'm going to put 0. And then this lighter blue section is where you begin to estimate what you're going to do. So this is this is how the local exhaust fans will be set up when you're done weatherizing the house. So if we were going to do nothing at all to these fans, then you would just put the same numbers in. You'd just say, well, when we're done, the kitchen will still be moving 32 CFM of air. And I'm not going to use that as part of my whole building strategy. So it would just be considered a local exhaust fan only. If you'll notice on this drop-down menu, you have local exhaust, intermittent, continuous, or none. And so that's a little bit of a change as well from the older calculator. But this way you can document that when you're done, this is still just going to be considered local exhaust. And does it have an operable window? Yes or no? In this case, no. So this is calculating that we actually have a deficit because we're supposed to have 100 CFM of air. We have a deficit of 68, and that's okay. If we don't do anything to that fan, it's just going to add 25% of our deficit to our whole building ventilation. And it's just going to tell us just turn that fan up a little bit to compensate for the lack of a fan in the kitchen. And then bath number 1, we have, if we're going to do nothing, we'd say it's a 15 CFM local exhaust fan, and we have a window. So in this case, we have a 15 CFM deficit. And bathroom number 2, there's no fan, and we're not going to change that. So you could either put local exhaust or more accurately just put none because there is no fan. And there's no window, so this one's going to give us a deficit of 50. Now, if we look at our calculator now, it's telling us that based on what's going on in the house, we need 74 CFM of ventilation in order to meet the ASHRAE standard. So what could we do to meet that standard? This is where we have options. Give me some ideas. What would you guys do out there to meet ASHRAE in this scenario?
We could install 2 continuous fans in the 2 baths.
Okay. And why would you install 2?
Because it's going to be a little over 50, and over 50, it's a little noisy. So we like to do 2 if they're over 50.
Gotcha. So you're concerned about the noise, and one of the things we didn't delve into at all is one of the ASHRAE requirements is that the fans cannot be louder than 1 zone. So The guys up in Logan do have a standard that they have applied, and Zach's telling you what it is. It's whenever they go over 50, if they're going to use a local exhaust fan, or sorry, not a local exhaust fan. If they're going to use a exhaust fan in a bathroom or a kitchen, they like to keep those things running under 50 in order to keep the noise down. So yeah, so you could add a fan to each one of those bathrooms. Any other ideas? What else could we do?
Makeup air or HRV.
Yeah. And so instead, we could leave all these local exhaust fans alone. We could just add some ventilation somewhere else, either with an HRV, or we could add makeup air to the HVAC system, right? So let's do the first one that Zach mentioned. So if we were going to do that, let's put those fans in. And how much air do they typically move? You guys use the adjustable ones, or do you guys use the fixed ones?
We use the adjustable.
So do they start at like, they go 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80? Is that kind of the...
Yep, that's correct.
All right. So let's say, so they have a switch in them that lets you kind of adjust it. Let's say we're going to put one in and we're planning on adjusting it to 50. And instead of it being a local exhaust fan, then we're going to change it to a continuous fan. So just by putting that one in bathroom 1, we don't quite have enough. So we'd put another one in bathroom 2, and we could put that one in at 50. And if we put that one in continuous, then we would have enough Ashrae, but this is telling us we're going to be over ventilating. And this is one of the scenarios I wanted to talk about. Like when I asked the question, are you guys over ventilating? When you're estimating your Ashrae, think about this. So like, what could we do in this situation to fix the problem?
Well, in our fans, we would just turn it 30-30.
All right. So we know that we're putting in fans that they have some flexibility on them, right? So they're adjustable. So we'll dial that back down to 30-30. And that solved our problem. It's pretty simple. And that's what we see most of the time, is just we use that flexibility to make some adjustments. What else could we have done? What if this was one of those fixed fans that you can't adjust? It's just 50 CFM all the time. And we put in 2 of them. And then what else could we do? Can we put in one of those smart switches and make it an intermittent fan?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, so if we made it intermittent and we just said, all right, let's go ahead, and it looks like there's an error on my calculator I need to fix. But if that would dial that down to 20 minutes, fix that. Yeah, so if we just made one of the fans intermittent so it wasn't running all the time, that would also solve our problem. So on the calculator, please note that this purple section here and also down below is representing what your whole building strategy is. And make sure that you are making mental notes that that's separate from your local exhaust. Like we are using, in this scenario, we are using the fans in the bathroom to meet our local exhaust. Because if you'll notice, when we made these, we decided we were going to turn these into whole building fans, the deficit went away. It reduced the deficit in those rooms because we now have local exhaust fans in each of those that have 50 CFM whenever we flip the switch on and off. And we have one of them that's going to be on all the time. We have another one that'll come on intermittently and cover us for our local exhaust, or our whole building ventilation. Sorry. But that's why this one says we're getting whole building ventilation from our local exhaust right here. And then if that's not what we're doing, if we're going to have some other strategy, then we would list that stuff down below. All right, so let's do another scenario. So scenario number 2, another single family home in Pleasant Grove. We got the square footage, the bedrooms, the height, and our local exhaust fans. So let's go ahead and put those into a calculator here. See if I can get them both on the screen. So again, dwelling type is a single family detached. We got 4 bedrooms, 1 occupant this time. And the dwelling height is 18 feet. So we know we have a whole building ventilation needed of 38. And then let's see if we get an infiltration credit. So our nearest weather station to Pleasant Grove would probably be Provo, maybe. Our dwelling height is 18 feet. So nobody's going to say anything about my mistake. Come on. Help a brother out. 1987 was the square footage. And then our pre-blower door down here, we have 3274. And so yeah, our estimated whole building ventilation was actually 97 when I put in the proper square footage. And our credit is 91. So right now, it looks like we don't really need much ventilation. But then we got to take a look at our local exhaust situation. So we have 2 bathrooms again. And before weatherization, there's no fan in the kitchen. There's a fan in the bath that moves 54, and there is no fan in bath number 2. So again, if we just left those alone, and we said none, we called this one local exhaust and this one none. And then our windows, do we have operable windows in the kitchen? No. In bathroom 1, yes. In bathroom 2, yes. So this gives us a scenario where we have a deficit on our local exhaust fans. So we really don't need whole building ventilation because our infiltration credit kind of drops us down below that 15. But we have a bunch of local exhaust deficit. So how would we deal with this? Because it's telling us basically we need 40 CFM of continuous ventilation to meet ASHRAE. You guys got any ideas?
I would just install 1 exhaust fan, make it continuous.
Where would you put that fan?
I would just put in bathroom 2.
So you'd put 1 fan in bathroom 2. Now, why would you put it in bathroom 2 instead of bathroom 1?
Well, actually, I would put it, depends on the location of the bathroom. So if bathroom 2 was upstairs in the master bathroom, I would install it there because it's easier to install them through the roof.
Gotcha.
But also their bathroom number 1 already has some exhaust, and put an exhaust in the other bathroom to help out.
Yeah, so all of these things that Zach is thinking about needs to be part of the strategy. How hard will the fan be to install? If there's not a fan in this one, is that going to be the best room to put it in? The other option is, if that is difficult, you could just replace the one in bathroom 1 with something. But so let's try doing what Zach mentioned. So let's say we make bathroom 2 a 50 CFM continuous fan. That solve our problem? That did not solve our problem. And we're still getting red here. It actually gives us enough ventilation because we only need 50 CFM, or we only need 31. But this is basically trying to point out that this may not be the best solution, because what we did is we went into this house where it just had local exhaust deficits, and we turned on a fan all the time. What if we were to just fix the local exhaust deficit? What if we could actually put a fan in the kitchen that would be local exhaust only? Would that solve our problem? Let's take this one back to none. So in this scenario, instead of turning on a continuous fan, what if we just put a local exhaust fan above the kitchen, the range, and got rid of that deficit? Then we still need a little bit of, gosh, there's an error going on. Estimated strategy. Oh, yeah, there's a little error. This actually says because we only need 15 CFM that we meet ASHRAE, which is correct. So, but yeah, basically, instead of running a fan continuously, we didn't even have to put in an ASHRAE fan above the stove in the kitchen. We just put in a regular fan and vented it outside and showed that it was moving more than 100 CFM of air. That got rid of our local exhaust and got us to where we meet ASHRAE without having to provide whole building ventilation. And this is a scenario, you're not going to see it all the time. The stars kind of have to align on this one, but they align more often than you think. And I really want you guys to keep an eye on this one. When you're running these estimates, be aware of the opportunities you have to just fix the local exhaust deficit instead of turning on continuous ventilation. Because if you're just turning on continuous ventilation, then you really are wasting energy for that client by over ventilating their house when you could have done something different. That one make sense? Questions from anybody?
Once again, I was thinking about that kitchen fan that you put in. It depends on how easy it is to put them in. Like sometimes you go into a house where there's no, you got to add in all the venting for that kitchen. It might be a pain to do it. So sometimes bathroom fan might be easier to go.
Yes. And that's, this is there's kind of a catch-22 here. It's because auditors are required to come up with a plan. And auditors are expected to actually think through the plan a little more than sometimes we see on the paperwork. I do see a lot of scenarios where the auditor will kind of say, yeah, install a bathroom fan if you can. And it kind of sounds like they never even got up in the attic to look to see if they could. I realize they probably did, and they're trying to just leave the door open, but be aware, auditors, you really do need to give some thought to this and think about, can we actually install what we're calling for? But the other thing Zach's pointing out is that the auditor might come up with a great plan, but then what happens if you go in and instead of getting a 30% reduction, you get a 40% reduction? Well, now just providing the local exhaust doesn't cover us. Now we need some extra ventilation. And so now we got to add continuous ventilation. So it's the estimate, because there's so many moving pieces when it comes to ASHRAE, the estimate is just an estimate. And that is why you want to come up with a plan, but you don't really want to implement that plan until you've done all your air sealing on the job and you've done your final calculations so that you can see if that plan will actually work. And if it doesn't, it's okay to change the plan a little bit. So thank you for that. I had another scenario, but we are out of time. I did want to talk about I think I had it on the next scenario. I wanted to talk about two parts of this scenario really quickly, and then we'll end. So I had this scenario, really everything's pretty much the same, but under local exhaust, I had listed a half bath and an exhaust fan in the laundry room. And I've had this question a handful of times where people will call me and ask me, what do I do with these? They don't fit into the calculator. So where do I put that half bath? If you have a half bath and you got a fan in it, where would you put that on the calculator? Anybody want to take a guess? Where does the half bath go on the calculator? Oops, that's too far back.
If there's no bathtub in the bathroom, then we don't count it.
Yeah, so it does not go on the calculator. We're only, when we're talking about local exhaust, it's not a local exhaust fan because we only require, local exhaust fans are only required in kitchens and baths that have a shower or a tub in them. So this one does not, it's not part of the local exhaust. And unless you were going to do something with the fan in that room to make it part of your whole building strategy, it would not go onto your calculator at all. What about the exhaust fan on the ceiling in a laundry room? Where would that one go on the calculator? This one's the same scenario. Yes, it is an exhaust fan, but it's not a local exhaust fan. And so unless you were going to do something with that fan to use it as part of your whole building strategy, it wouldn't go on the calculator. If it was, if you installed that or if you modified that to make it part of your strategy, then you could add that and say, I don't know, oh, I did have a laundry room there. You know, you'd say, I've got an exhaust fan in the laundry room and it moves 65 CFM of air, and I'm going to make it intermittent to cover my deficit here. So if you're using it as part of your strategy, then you'd put it on this part of the calculator. But if it's just a regular old exhaust fan and it's not part of your strategy and it's not a local exhaust fan, then it doesn't go on the calculator at all. There was one house where it was just an interesting scenario, but the laundry room was right next to the kitchen. It was really, and there wasn't even a door between them. There was like this little wall that kind of divided the rooms, but basically about 8 feet away from the stove was an exhaust fan that moved like 120 CFM of air. And in that situation, I think the auditor had mistakenly thought that counted as the fan for the kitchen, and it does not, for two reasons. One reason was it was not in the kitchen, and the second reason was that kitchen fan, it has to be the fan directly above the range top. So if you have a fan, even if you have a fan in the kitchen but it's out on the ceiling, 4 or 5 feet away from the range, that typically does not meet that local exhaust deficit. There's a drop down note there that basically says if it's out on the ceiling and it's not directly above the range, then it actually needs to move 300 CFM of air. So be aware of that as well as you're thinking through these strategies. But once again, I would just really encourage you guys to, I feel like most of the time we put a exhaust fan in a bathroom and that solves our problem, and it's the perfect solution. But be aware, it's not the only solution. There are a ton of moving parts on Ashrae, and I would encourage you to take a second look at some of your calculations and just ask yourself, will this overventilate the house? Is there any way I can reduce the local exhaust deficit as part of my strategy? Can I do that safely and still give myself flexibility to meet Ashrae? Or, if that one feels risky, then maybe don't take that risk and just do the local or the the exhaust fans, but watch for that. Watch for opportunities to basically minimize the amount of continuous ventilation that you're doing in the homes whenever you can. So anyway, that's all I've got. You guys have any questions on any of this before we end?
Somebody had a question on there.
Oh,
I put in the chat. I was just asking, what do you do when you run into two kitchens?
that's a
Like
great
a
question. Thank
kitchen in the main level and one in the basement.
Yeah. So you actually are supposed to have 100 CFM fan above both ranges in order to meet ASHRAE, and our calculator is not set up for it. And I don't know if the red calculator is set up for it or not. If you run into that situation, look at the red calculator. If that's not working, then give me a call. If you find that that kitchen does have a fan that moves the 100 CFM of air, then you really could just note that, because all that's saying is that there is a kitchen, but there is no deficit. But if that kitchen does not have it, then there really is a legitimate deficit that we're supposed to be adding to all of this. And we just never made our calculator so that it will count for it. But I've seen 2 of those this year during monitoring, so it happens. But yeah, thanks for that, Shad. All right, any other questions? Cool. Well, thanks for bearing with me on this one. And thank you guys for all that you're doing. And stay safe out there. Have a good day.